Good morning and thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to our time together this morning. Let me say a special thank you to Chris James Brown. I couldn't have thought of a person that I would more have, rather introduced me today than anyone that I know in this movement. Chris is one of the most talented, committed professionals anywhere in this business. Chris, thank you for your support, for your friendship, and especially for the commitment you make to this movement every day. Chris James Brown, thank you. And I got to tell you, it's a strange feeling being on this side of this speech. For 20 years, I've been on that side of this speech, and I know what the expectations are like. The number of you that have come to me and said, boy, this is really an important speech, you got to do well on this one. And I remember sitting out there thinking the same thing. But I really have a great feeling this morning, quite honestly, because since I've been in this job and had the opportunity to travel across the country and see what's going on in your communities, I've learned a lot more about the movement I've been a part of for 20 years. And there's a positive feeling about our work of mobilizing communities that I haven't seen in a long time. So I feel very comfortable, very positive about what's going on. I also realize that I'm really among friends and colleagues who are as committed to what I'm about as anybody. I realize that I'm among friends, and that makes me feel great. Given the events of the 11th, is there any question that we live in a historically important time, economically, socially, politically? I truly believe that the decisions that we make today will affect the communities in which we live in this country for years and maybe decades to come. We have the responsibility to build on the courage of tens of thousands of Americans and what they've done over the last number of months. Our work has never been more important, not just in rebuilding lives in New York and in Washington, but rebuilding lives and rebuilding communities and helping communities heal all across America. The greatest lesson, in my estimation, out of September the 11th was that united works. Can you imagine trying to respond to those attacks and then what came afterwards if it wasn't collective action? If surviving families didn't come together to support each other and move together, if agencies didn't come together, if we didn't move on that kind of thing collectively, you don't make the progress, you don't recover as quickly as those communities have begun to recover, families have begun to recover, and as a nation we've begun to recover. Uniting communities and mobilizing communities is what's made us a great movement. It'll also drive our future success and our relevance in the future. It is the greatest use of United Way. This idea that we have a position in your community where you can pull together people, institutions that may have different points of view at times around a collective set of issues that you have to deal with together. That's the value and that's the power of United Way. It's also how we began. It's our history. If you look back in every community I've been in, I've read this history. It started around the Industrial Revolution. And it didn't start as a fundraising campaign. It started because the Industrial Revolution created social need along with wealth and opportunity like communities had never seen before. Thousands of people moving from rural areas into cities for jobs. And now communities faced with issues around health and education and housing and juvenile delinquency like they had never seen before. There was no way you could continue to respond to those issues just as a family or just as a single institution. So the business community, organized labor, people in the faith community, ordinary citizens started coming together to talk about how we're going to respond to these things. World War I came along, and community after community, you created war chests in your community. You combine that war relief effort with the early planning efforts and flipped all those war chests into community chests. We then started bringing agencies together and saying, you know what, maybe we want to start raising some money together, and it worked. We raised more money, it was more efficient, and we did it for decades. Through the 30s, 40s, 50s, along came payroll deduction, and off we went in terms of a fundraising federation. The thing that I think is really important to keep in mind in terms of that evolution of our history is that it didn't begin as a fundraising federation, it began as a planning effort, and the reason, in my estimation, long-term, that the fundraising focus worked, it created impact at a community level that we had never seen before. It worked in changing people's lives and the condition of communities. And now the times have changed again. And unlike 100 years ago, the evolution of change in our world today is at such a pace that it's hard to keep up with. Think of the things that we're dealing with. 25,000 new nonprofits on a net basis created every year in this country. Competition like we've never seen before in United Way. We used to enjoy a monopoly position in a controlled marketplace. No longer. Technology that's moved at such a pace that it challenges anyone who's the middleman in any process. In a campaign federation, in a campaign model, we are the ultimate middleman. Our communities growing together geographically. When we created most of our United Ways and municipality lines were drawn, that's how people lived. They lived inside of those lines. They're not necessarily living inside of our lines anymore. And diversity as communities, as a nation that we've never seen before in our history. In the state of California, over half the people, the majority of the people that live in the state of California are ethnic minorities. State of Texas, that'll be true in the next several years. As a country, that'll be true by the year 2050. But maybe, again, the greatest change that we're seeing as a country and now affecting our movement and our business is economic change. The fact is, if you take the last 2 years and discount the recession and look at those 10 or 12 years before that, the longest economic expansion in our nation's history. We've gone from an agrarian society to an industrial society to a service economy to now a global technology economy that again creates incredible wealth and opportunity where you can make a lot of money or lose a lot of money pretty quickly. The other thing that this economy does, with no political point of view on my part, no partisanship on my part, it doesn't distribute wealth and income as evenly as earlier economies have. So you can have a great economic expansion in your community or in our country, and we can watch our middle class shrink and the number of families living close to poverty at an incredible rate, and the concentration of wealth getting greater and greater in our nation.